Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com, also video presentation. So we'll do a little bit of slit photon stuff and then get to some kinetic energy stuff, but it's really so redundant and so already been there and done this over and over and over. And so some of it just doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's just, there's just this point where you have to say, look, they're just belligerently arguing, okay? There's no, they would argue that water's not wet. They'd say, oh, what about when it's frozen? What about when it's in a glass jar? They'll make up some kind of crazy crap so you can't say water's wet anymore. And, they're trying to argue that gravity isn't a constantly pushing force, frankly. Whether you want to call it a pull or a push, doesn't matter, but that it's at a rate, and the gravity it's about how long you're in it, okay? Just like photons, it's about how long you're in it. The sunlight will decide how much tan you get. Where you travel is irrelevant. It's how long you're in the sun, how long you're in the paint sprayer. It just to have to argue this is beneath. Frankly, it's beneath anything that could be called a reasonable conversation with anything that's reasonably adult. So anyway, so let's do the other stuff first. I'll do a little two slit stuff. Just highlight 2 points. Just two. So I've made this argument before about the fact that their pattern doesn't match, and it's just a fact. So in single slit, there is no, if you do the experiment correctly and properly, there's no such thing as anything called interference. There's just a solid wave that goes in. You could argue, okay, photons go in, photons come out in a different direction, and water. And there's nothing, no pattern, nothing, no bars, no nothing, just a clear little blob of force hits and no fringes, no any of that stuff. And then when they do this double slit, they put a second slit over here and pretend, okay, that you have two water waves that are now doing this interference thing. What it doesn't account for is the actual pattern you get when you create that circumstance, that is where you have two sources. And when you have two sources, you end up with a double maxima, okay. And now they can do the double slit with, slits that are so close together that, yes, they only get a single slit pattern. And they can get one that doesn't have the double maxima because they've basically eliminated any close sources. That is, they've taken away anything close, and all you have is this big giant distance. And the big giant distance doesn't create the overlap. But anyway, it's not a double slit pattern. The true double slit pattern is this pattern. That's the fact. Okay, always an odd number here in the double. Okay, and then you get the even number that's divisible into that odd number. Okay, or any number, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And it's always an odd number here in the center because you're basically adding these two. 3, plus 3 is 6, minus 1 is 5. That kind of thing. This is the real double slit pattern. And again, people denying that are just living in a delusion, frankly. That's the reality, and this doesn't create it. 2 waves doesn't create this pattern. You need 4 waves. You need 4 sources. And that's a fact. And I shouldn't have to argue beyond that much. So anyway, this, again, is not accounted for at all. That missing feature in their slit pattern. The other thing that's missing, okay, is recognizing that their wave theory, isn't that quite annoying? Okay, I'll have to pause because it's difficult to erase for some dopey reason. Alright, should be back. Alright, so the other thing that's missing is the idea that when they do this wave thing, okay, I guess I'll just draw it, because I don't have much choice to illustrate the point, I suppose. These go on, and the idea is there's not more intensity in this direction than there is intensity in this direction. The wave is even in all directions. So frankly, they should get a pattern, you know, if we did put it on, especially if we put it on an arc surface, we should be getting pattern that goes evenly across this entire surface. So the brightness here shouldn't be any brighter than the brightness here. And there's no reason to say there shouldn't be visible nodes in all these locations. And the fact is the real pattern is quite obviously it diminishes quite rapidly into invisibility. Okay, and that's the reality. And so they're not accounting for all of this missing photons, the photons that don't exist, that don't show up in all these locations where they're supposed to be. And clearly a non-wave theory that says that it's really just about the number of photons that hit these locations, and that the fact would be is that if they're bent a certain amount, and only that amount, a limited amount, that even if they hit multiple, let's say they hit multiple electrons, they can only be bent a total amount. They really have no probability of being bent to this location. So it's perfectly reasonable to expect the pattern to diminish, because it's more and more unlikely. Say if you have to hit 2 electrons to be here, and you have to hit 4 to be here, and you have to hit 6 to be here. It's obvious that it's going to become less and less likely you're going to hit that many electrons. And that's why there's fewer and fewer photons out in those locations, because it's less and less probable that the photon's path will be sufficiently bent to send light in that direction. So it's another factor that just clearly their drawing is not consistent with the outcome. And they're just pretending it's just like when it's nothing at all like, frankly. And then they're claiming, again in the kinetic energy argument, that things that are just like aren't just like, when they clearly are just like. And again, it's the giveaway is, as I stated, I don't know if, Mindless Marbles doesn't respond to anything, any points made, but when Leonard Susskind teaches, quantum and relativity theories, he uses mock gravity, and he uses a constant stream of water as the force pushing things towards the Earth, or whatever the gravitational body is. It's exactly the same metaphor. I mean, rain or stream, are these really different analogies in any substantial way? Come on. Too ridiculous. So we'll talk some more about that and just give up, frankly. It's just that there's no conversation with people this belligerently, frankly, dishonest and stupid. I mean, I guess they're more dishonest than they are stupid, but it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, stupid or dishonest, it's all the same garbage. Alright, so let's read this slop, and then I will respond to it for, I would think, the last time. I mean, really, there's so many videos, and it's been made so clear. It's just no point in us arguing it. We'll just have to decide that, yes, you're just too stupid for a conversation, and you can't understand 2 plus 2 is 4. It's just that bad, and there's no point in me trying to teach you multiplication. Seriously, these people are purely illogical. So obviously all these arguments are quite logical, and all of their arguments are completely word games, and that's the simple truth. See the images and comment thread. I don't know, I didn't see any images. How do you even argue against that? I am at a loss for words as to what to do. Just give up, okay? Go move on, because yes, we can't agree, all right? You're arguing that water isn't wet. It's just too silly. You're breaking all language. You're breaking the continuity of concepts. It's just ridiculous to argue that the force of gravity isn't a force, that it isn't really doing something, that it isn't doing it based on how much time it has to act on an object. It's ridiculous to argue how much time it has to act on an object isn't exactly what gravity is doing. It's idiotic, it's ludicrous, it's anti-Feynman, it's anti-Susskind again. Feynman pointed out how mock gravity perfectly duplicates, all of the gravitational requirements. it says it's a perfect model, except, for the drag problem, which doesn't really have anything to do with gravity. So, but he says it models the inverse square law, it models the pressure, it models it all perfectly. So you're saying Feynman was an idiot. You don't understand how Feynman believed that. How could he believe the force was essentially active? How can Susskind turn gravity into an active force, a fluid moving? You're saying you don't understand how Susskind could use that model of a moving fluid to explain gravity. Amazing. First, the claim was that gravity affects you less the faster you moved. It's circumstantial, quite obviously. If you're moving from a location where you're not being affected to a location where you're being affected strongly, that is, you're moving towards the Earth is here and you're moving towards it, the gravity's obviously getting stronger and stronger, you're going to go through this field of gravity. And then the argument was done by appealing to the rain analogy. Next, it was pointed out that by the rain analogy, you reach an exact opposite conclusion. So I don't know exactly how, again, what kind of word games you're playing to fuck up a simple analogy that if you're going to be in the rain a limited amount of time, the time will tell you how much rain will hit you. You can run around in circles outside in the rain all you want, and you can make little tiny circles or really big circles. You can go fast, you can go slow. And all that's really going to matter is how long you're in the rain. I mean, the Mythbusters actually did this video also, okay, and they couldn't really get outside the margin of error. That is, they couldn't run into the rain with enough speed to make any significant difference. Next, it was pointed out that by the rain analogy, you reach the exact opposite conclusion, and that after that, Basin Bass finally admits the analogy is not one-to-one perfect. Well, that's his business. Again, he wants to get into a conversation of word games. That's his business. Saying if a human is in the rain at the same time, then the same amount of rain will be applied to the human. Well, that makes sense. If one's sitting in a chair and one's running around in circles, they're both going to get equally wet. Without somehow realizing that completely contradicts the very first post made. So, more nonsense. No doubt the analogy will still be invoked by DraftScience and others. Well, yeah, there's no doubt I'm going to make logical arguments that are perfectly consistent with every fact ever gleaned by the human race. Any idiot knows it's about how long you sit in the sun will decide how suntanned you get. And it really won't matter whether your chair slowly rotates or goes up and down a little bit. It's not going to make any fucking difference, and every idiot can figure that out. Okay, despite the fact that it doesn't even imply when they think it implies. So again, I've been over these analogies and over these analogies. They're rock solid. They're indestructible. No rational, reasonable person will ever dispute these facts that, how long you place something in a spray paint. If I'm spray painting, the faster I move the can, the less paint gets on the surface. The slower I move the can, the more paint gets on the surface. There's not an imbecile on this planet that will refute that or dispute that. I wish I am proven wrong on this. You've already been proven wrong on this, but I've seen so much of this pattern where the so-called debates go into circles. And they're going into circles clearly because you don't want words to mean what they mean. All right, and you're going to play a game that you think gravity moves as slowly as rain. Well, it really doesn't. The rain analogy is basically saying, yes, it's a very fast rain. Okay, you're not going to be able to run fast enough to crash into it sideways. That's not the subject. Not even anywhere near the subject, and you know it. And this is just playing a game with some of the most important things that a human being has, which is his language and vocabulary. And here you are turning it into shit. You disgusting piece of crap. Because Gary forgets everything and resets back to his default nonsense, which is a just completely unproven statement of any whatever the default nonsense is. I made the simple analogy. It's like a bucket, you collect it. That's how gravity is. Your mass is the bucket, you collect it with your mass bucket. If I drop a hammer and a feather, the hammer has a whole big bucket, the feather has a little tiny bucket. It's a wind blowing, however you want to look at it. It's the size of the sail. The hammer collects a lot of energy. It lands on the ground. It goes boom because it collected a lot of energy. The feather has a very small bucket, collects very little energy, doesn't land with any kind of boom. I mean, again, these are concepts literally a 5-year-old could understand. You could put it on the scale for a 5-year-old and show them. Yeah, it's just too ridiculous. All right, so, I won't bother, with this nonsense, their comment section nonsense. I don't know what Gosling, let's see what Gosling says. I have made a video explaining why Draft's analogy does not work. He puts in capital letter. Unsurprising, both you and I have so far ignored this. Both you and he have so far ignored this. Yeah, I'm ignoring everything you have to say, okay? You've proven yourself just ludicrous idiot, okay? You're now irrelevant. Also rude, useless idiot. You can't do anything honest. You just don't have an honest bone in your lousy, fat, blubbery body. So we're done communicating. Anyway, so instead of Mindless Marvels posting a link to a scientific experiment showing that it's 4 times the energy, twice the velocity, 4 times the energy. So they won't even do that, right? I'd like to see the 3 times the velocity, 9 times the energy. That would be even better. Or 4 times the velocity, 16 times the energy. Yeah, show me that. Show me any indication that this crap is true, okay, of real evidence. So show me. Show me how it's not a time-dependent force. Show me any circumstance where anybody does any kind of experiment where time doesn't have something to do with how much gravity is collected. It's just so silly. All right, so I'll just go through all the crap I have gone through briefly and say, look, it's, this just isn't reasonable. It's just not reasonable to have to argue this crap over and over again. It's just so obvious and so simple. All right, so you have this rain analogy. You're going to go from building A to building B, and what's going to matter? If you walk a crooked path or you take a skateboard, it doesn't matter how you get from point A to point B. The only thing that's going to matter is how much time you allow this force, that, and let's say the rain's coming at 9.8 drops, per millisecond. Just like gravity, it has a rate. This is a rate, okay? And it can't be a rate if there's no action. Rates are actions. It's a rate. So there's a certain amount of this stuff coming down, and the fact is a certain amount of it's going to hit you and the more time you give it to hit you, the more of it's going to hit you. So it's just too obvious. The paint spray thing is just so obvious, right? You have a can of spray paint, whether I move my hand in front of it or whether I move the spray can, it doesn't matter. All that matters is there's a rate of these little droplets flying through space, and there's a rate at which they cross any path I place, anything I put in front of them. There's a rate of droplets hitting that, going through that plane. And the simple argument is that yes, all that really matters is how long you're in front of it. I could jitter it back and forth, I can do all kinds of things, but none of that crap will make any difference to the fact that there's a rate, and it's just about how long it's in that rate. I can travel 0 distance or I could travel 500 miles. It just doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how long I'm exposed to the rate of particles. Okay, crossing a stream, same difference, right? Or wind. You could just say that's the wind argument. You're going to go from point A to point B. What's going to decide how far off, how much you're going to have to fight, how much energy you're going to have to apply in this direction to get to point B? Well, what's going to decide is this rate, 9.8 drops, per millisecond. Okay, that's going to decide how much you're going to be thrown downstream and how much you're going to have to fight to get back to point B. Thin ice, okay, what's going to decide whether the ice breaks? What's going to decide is that your total pressure per surface area, okay, and what's going to decide that is how quickly you get across the ice. You go across the ice very slowly, you have plenty of time to collect lots of force, and you will apply sufficient pressure to break the ice. If you go across quickly, you don't have time to collect the force in your bucket, and you will successfully traverse the ice without breaking. All right, sunlight, suntan, just too obvious, okay? It just doesn't matter whether I move my chair, I don't move my chair. Doesn't make any difference whether the chair goes from point A to a point B. It just matters how long is it in the sun, period. That's it. I can have a little shade thing here. So the sun is moving, it gets behind the shade thing. I don't get any more tan because I'm not getting any more force. And it's just about how long I'm exposed to the sun will decide how many photons I collected. Then the real actual gravity argument. I'm going to go past a gravitational body. I'm a speeding asteroid, and what's going to decide how much I'm bent is my velocity. If I'm going really fast at this direction that isn't an impact direction, fact is I won't hit the Earth. If I'm going slower and slower, the velocity, the more likely it is I hit the Earth. Simple fact, truth. It's just about how much time you give this force to affect the thing traveling across the exposure zone. So again, the analogy is that your mass is essentially a bucket. Ugh. Oh, fuck. Computer. Alright, should be back. Computers. So anyway, I was just getting to the finishing up. But yes, the gravity, the real gravity analogies all work. I mean, if you're going against gravity, you're going with gravity. The fact is, if an asteroid comes in at a huge, giant velocity, it won't gain anything from our earthly gravity because it won't be in the gravity long enough to collect anything. It'll be in the strong, if it's moving thousands of miles an hour, it'll be in the strong gravity for a mere few seconds. The few seconds will only be 9.8 meters per second, so it could be going 20,000 miles an hour coming in, and it'll be going 20,017 going, when it impacts. It won't gain anything. And of course, the atmosphere will slow it down, but let's just pretend there was no atmosphere. It's like the moon or something. Alright, so anyway, those arguments are rock solid. There's none of this has been debunked by anybody. It's just absolute nonsense that you can dispute any of this stuff. Gravity is a real force. It happens at a real rate. That's been well established, well proven by just about every single reasonable, decent scientist. I can't even imagine somebody arguing that gravity doesn't come at a rate. The rate is stated all over the place. All right, so the simple truth is that your mass is essentially a bucket, okay, and gravity is a substance falling into the bucket, and that if somebody touches your bucket, you lose whatever's in the bucket. The longer they touch you, the more you lose. Let's put it that way. You can lightly touch, take a little bit of their force. You can strongly touch, like the earth. When you're plowing into the earth right now, you're strongly touching the earth. The earth is taking all your force, so you can't go any velocity. And it's also pushing you back up. And these are all facts, okay? The fact is that you can duplicate the momentum of gravity. That is, the momentum down can be duplicated by just having a velocity and pushing anything at the same velocity, 1 mile an hour, into a scale, and it will produce the same. Their mass will be the same as their weight, okay, on the scale. The pressure applied, the momentum, that reading will be duplicated. These are all facts, and they're just in this insane denial of these facts because, frankly, accepting these facts does mean that, yeah, they probably can't argue that 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same as 1 pound dropped 4 feet, and that's just not true. Another experiment for which they have no evidence. It's just too silly. So I'm not going to re-argue it. This is the ABCs of logic and reasoning. To claim that gravity isn't a constant force at a constant rate is just idiotic. A constant pressure being applied at a constant rate, and that time is integral to how you will be affected by gravity. It is everything. In terms of figuring out, you want to know how much what's going to happen, you just figure out how calculate how long the object is being pushed by the gravity, and where, if there's any force leakage, that if it's touching anything, how that touching is affecting how much it's collecting. And that's all you do. It's not complicated at all. So it's just all such a pile of crap. All right, I did forget on the 2 slit thing to do this little bit of a Argo spot thing. So we'll do that real quick. So that was a subject brought up by the other guy. So this is a pretty good image of one. I guess I could zoom it in. Who knows if the computer will tolerate it. All right, so the idea is you have a dense amount of light. You put an object to block the light, a round object. And the prediction was, hundreds of years ago, that you would get this little spot in the center. And the prediction was based on this idea that they couldn't see all of these rings. So to them, it was just that it was black. So where you see the little dark rings, in this area, those didn't show up back then. So, yeah, and they're not really showing up for you. You don't really see them, but there are rings in here. And the fact is, people didn't really see that, and what they saw was this little magical dot in the middle of this black. And it really isn't a magical dot. It's just another ring. And the fact is, when you put all of the photons that were going to be in the ring right in that little tiny spot, you'll get an image. You'll see the photons. And you can't see them when they're spread out too thin. And you can actually see this in this diagram where the rings get brighter as they get smaller, meaning it's the same number of photons going over a smaller and smaller surface. And that's why you're getting a little bit brighter. So they're darkest where they're the biggest, because it's the same number of photons over a longer surface, a bigger surface area. So just like the ice analogy. And as you make it more and more photons on a smaller and smaller amount of surface, there's a higher and higher likelihood you'll see the photons. You'll get enough photons for your eyes to see them. So again, it's just another, there's absolutely nothing magical about the fact that when you focus all the light on one tiny location, that the light becomes more visible. And the more you spread the photons out, the less visible the brightness is. You can't see it because your eye can't see single photons, essentially. It needs a certain number of photons to create enough energy to make the object visible to your eye. Alright, so that's enough of that, I think. I will read one website comment. It's just a ragged shit, but it's just something to respond to, in the sense that these people think these are arguments in some way, and they're really not even close to being arguments. So we probably don't need this on the screen anyway. So we'll just get rid of that, and I will read the dopey comment. How does it feel to be stuck in a completely futile, endless loop? Yeah, I could say that about life in general, okay, and then I could say that every human is basically stuck in an endless loop of, live, fail, die, live, fail, die, live, fail, die, live, fail, die. And, sometimes they get to do it with sunglasses on. Sometimes they have a neat little hat they get to wear. But it's always the same fucking bullshit. All right. You walk every day, but you're going absolutely nowhere. So he's saying there's been no progress in his arguments, no progress in substantiation, and I say that's ridiculous. The simulation is done nothing but get better and better. I wish the people who were doing it had more time to do work on it, but whatever. And the further deeper you go into these arguments, the more and more my model fits, and I can demonstrate your model to fail. So I don't see how I'm going nowhere. I think you're going nowhere defending things like not doing the Eddington experiment from space with 400 times better resolution, and defending the idea that that's good science. That's failing, just overtly. You're not just walking in the wrong direction, you're on a fucking treadmill. Whatever. Yes, life is a treadmill. It's work to do anything in this planet because there's imbeciles always in the way. If it wasn't for the fucktards, right, we wouldn't have to have speed bumps, and we wouldn't have to have this, and we wouldn't have to have that, and we wouldn't have all these chains and all these gates and all this bullshit. But assholes like you do exist, so life becomes tedious and annoying. Because there's a lot of ignorant motherfuckers walking the streets. Like you. 500 years will have passed, and literally nothing you're saying here will have mattered. Says you. Yeah, like I could take that prediction seriously. Again, and 500 years has passed, since philosophers start speculating about the fact that maybe there's no God. And, most of the Earth's population is still, bowing to their totem poles. Yes, it's all hard work. talking the truth is hard work. Yes, I understand that. All right. You are being an unbelievable fool and entirely wasting your time. And I should do what with my time? Yeah, right. Hilarious. I wonder if you think Newton wasted his time, right? I mean, as it turns out right now, Newton has been completely replaced. They've replaced Newton with Leibniz, okay? And Newton's been completely dissed and insulted and degraded and all of that crap. Do you think he wasted his time? I don't think he wasted his time. All right, full and entirely wasting your time. This is a 100. I think he got a percent signal, which my chat doesn't allow. 100% certainty because you say so. The impressive anonymous coward says so. You will never listen to reason. So again, I don't have any problems. I'm perfectly satisfied. I've been perfectly reasonable. I've made perfectly rational arguments, and I haven't got anything back in return but babble, mush, farts, all kinds of smelly nonsense, but nothing like a counter argument. So he says the same thing twice, which really isn't a good sign. And somebody brought up Dr. Castro again. I don't know, what that even means. Frankly, that's the Chappelle Natural Philosophy Society thing or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's just too ridiculous. So nonsense everywhere. Just not anything reasonable to even have a banter about. I mean, this isn't even useful as banter. So I will try not to revisit these subjects with these morons. Again, it's just too ridiculous to have to argue that people can't understand that even though it's 9.8 meters per 1 second, that's an absolute fact. It comes at a rate that somehow it's not a moving force that you can collect. So even though it's just like a stream, it's a rate, just like wind, like a rate, just like photons, it's coming down at a rate. Gravity somehow isn't doing that when, that's exactly what it's doing. All right, so enough of a video. Till the next time and such. Hopefully the other part of the video won't be too broken, and we'll leave it there. What can I say? It's disappointing that people are profoundly stupid and obnoxious. And there's more than stupid, right? I mean, it's just more than just being ignorant. Being ignorant means, hey, I didn't know that. Oh, shit, that's really cool. That, ignorant can learn. These people are hostile against accepting truth. That's something other than just ignorant. They're religious kooks, frankly. There's nothing else to call them. They're fanatics for absolute crap, and they refused to actually think about it. They don't want to look at, oh yeah, ice. Yeah, I get that thing where you're going fast, you're putting less pressure on the ice because the gravity, the rate isn't fast enough. There's not enough rate of gravity to put energy into you, and then the energy goes into the ground. And because the gravity didn't put enough energy into you, it couldn't put more energy into the ground, and therefore it didn't break the ice. They don't want to bother thinking. Just obnoxious. They're obnoxious to the truth. They just find the truth so offensive. They must fight the truth. It's just evil, frankly. It's not just ignorance. It's evil.